So you just heard the story from Senator Young, and he had the benefit of knowing Richard Lugar more recently. And my story's a little different. I'm going to have to think back to 45 years ago. I was between my sophomore and junior years at Wabash College. Never knew I had an interest in politics, let alone that someday I'd be serving in the Lugar seat. How life drives you in certain directions. I remember then he took on Senator Birch Bayh, who I think had served several terms, recently passed away himself, another icon of Hoosier politics. And I said I wanted to get involved. And when you got a man like Richard Lugar, who took a risk, stuck his neck out to run for mayor after he'd been on a school board. Ironically, I was on a school board for 10 years when I decided to stick my neck out to run for state legislator. You think back how life drives you in certain directions, but with him most notably, during his entire life, he lived it with character and integrity. I think back when I first met him. I was dressed in a white turtleneck with a blue blazer and plaid pants. Wow, I can't believe we even dressed that way back in the 70s. I found those pictures stored away in a box about 4 or 5 years ago. Pulled them out, and my high school sweetheart, my wife now, she and I were looking at Dick as he was preparing to run for Senate, and the look on our faces, looking into the face of someone with his stature, really stood out. You know, you get this far down the trail, and I get asked, well, who were your mentors that got you to run for school board, state rep, and then Senate? You know, mostly it would have been my parents and my community. I say that often. But if there was one politician that I would have looked up to, even when I wasn't certain I ever wanted to get involved in politics at all, I would look back to that year back in the mid-70s when I decided to do it. You know, he was in the Senate for a long time, and during the entirety of his terms, he always did it to where, as a Hoosier, as an American, you were proud of him. And the thing that he did, as well as anyone, he was able to look across the aisle. In times when we were less polarized, now I think that trait, more than ever, would be something we need to pay attention to. So when you close the chapter on one individual's life, one whose life was so exemplary, like Richard Lugar, it should mostly be an inspiration for others that follow in his footsteps. I know in the state of Indiana, read the op-ed that was just put out by an individual that cites Richard Lugar as the most important public servant that ever came from our state. And gosh, I think you'd have to say that there's a lot of credibility to push that point of view. All I can tell you, for the time I'm here in the Lugar seat, I do intend to do what he did. On things he knew something a little about, he stuck his neck out, made a statement, he led. And in the entirety of his career here in the Senate, he was impeccable with integrity and character. And gosh, we could sure use a good dose of that in this day and age. It is an honor for me to be serving in his seat, and I hope to do even half as good a job in my stint here as he did over many, many years. Thank you. I yield.